Imagine committing a brutal double murder, disappearing without a trace, and then living a completely normal life for almost 50 years. You get married, you have a family, you run a successful business. Your neighbors say you're friendly, generous, hardworking. And then one day you get a knock at the door. And everything you've been hiding for 46 years suddenly comes crashing down. This is the case of Gerald Mason. The story begins on the night of July 22nd, 1957, in Southern California. 23-year-old Gerald Fitton Mason had recently arrived in California after traveling across the country. Earlier that year, he had been released from prison in South Carolina following a burglary conviction. While traveling west, he'd purchased a revolver using a false name. That evening, Mason encountered two teenage couples parked at a secluded lover's lane near Hawthorne, California. What happened next would change multiple lives forever. Mason approached the car with the teenagers in it with his revolver, forced them to get out of the car, removed their clothes, and he tied them up and blindfolded them. He separated one of the girls from the group and sexually assaulted her. The teenagers thought that they were going to be killed. After the attack, Mason stole the teenager's car. As he drove through El Segundo, he ran a red light. Two police officers noticed and initiated a traffic stop. Those officers were Richard Phillips, age 29, and Milton Curtis, age 25. Of course, this was before cell phones, etc., so they had no idea that they were pulling over a violent fugitive. When the officers approached the stolen vehicle, Mason made a decision that would haunt investigators for decades. According to his later confession, he believed that if he was arrested, his earlier crimes would surface. He later recalled thinking, "I'm going to get them, or they're going to get me." Without warning, he opened fire. Officer Milton Curtis was killed while sitting in the car. Officer Richard Phillips was mortally wounded after being shot multiple times. However, he did manage to get off 3 shots, and one of them actually hit Mason, and this would be an important piece of evidence for later. Mason fled the scene, abandoning the stolen vehicle and escaping through nearby neighborhoods before disappearing completely. The city of El Segundo was stunned. An attack on the teenagers and 2 police officers had been murdered in the line of duty, and the killer had vanished. Investigators immediately launched a massive manhunt. They processed the stolen vehicle and recovered several clues. Among the evidence was partial fingerprints found on the steering wheel. At the time, however, fingerprint technology was limited. Investigators had no national computerized system capable of comparing the print against millions of records. 3 years later, another major break occurred. The murder weapon was recovered from a backyard roughly a mile away from the shooting scene. Detectives traced the gun to a purchase made in Louisiana. The buyer had used the alias George D. Wilson. Investigators painstakingly tracked down countless people with that name across the United States, hoping to identify their suspect. Every lead ended in disappointment, and eventually the case went cold, and years turned into decades. The families of officers Curtis and Phillips waited for answers that never came. Yet investigators refused to give up. The case remained active, sitting in police files, while forensic science continued to evolve. While detectives searched for answers, Gerald Mason was building an entirely different life. After escaping California, he returned to South Carolina. There he became what appeared to be an ordinary citizen. He married, he raised children, he operated several service stations. According to his friends and neighbors, he was respected in the community. He was found to be very helpful and friendly. For 46 years, Mason lived with a secret. No arrests, no criminal activity, no public indication that he had committed these horrific crimes in California. To everyone around him, he seemed like a completely different man. But the evidence was still sitting, waiting, since 1957. And technology was about to catch up. In the early 2000s, the FBI expanded its computerized fingerprint databases. Records from arrests across the United States were added to the system, capable of comparing fingerprints electronically. Suddenly, evidence that had been dormant for decades could be analyzed in ways investigators in 1957 could only dream about. The partial thumbprint recovered from a stolen vehicle was entered into the system. A match appeared, belonging to Gerald Mason. His fingerprints had been collected for the burglary in South Carolina back in 1956. Investigators quickly assembled additional evidence. They connected Mason to the alias he used to purchase the murder weapon. Handwriting comparisons supported the connection. And when the detectives located him in South Carolina, he remarkably still had the scar from being shot from the police officer Phillips. The evidence was overwhelming. The cold case was finally solved. In 2003, Gerald Mason was arrested and charged. Faced with the evidence, he pleaded guilty. During the court proceedings, Mason expressed remorse and claimed he could not fully explain why he committed the murders. He apologized to the victims' families and asked for forgiveness. Not everyone accepted his apology. Family members pointed out that his remorse came only after decades of freedom and once he had been caught. Mason received 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders of Officer Curtis and Phillips. Other charges were dropped as a part of the plea agreement. At age 69, the man who had evaded justice for nearly half a century finally began serving time for his crimes. This is a remarkable example of how cold cases can be solved with the advances in forensic technology. Gerald Mason died in 2017 after serving 14 years of imprisonment. If you found this case interesting, please consider liking and subscribing for more. Thanks, and I'll see you soon.